I had a lady, Heidi Mund, from Germany come in March. I've had her come once a year for like the last 3 years. I know a number of you saw her here in Gig Harbor. And in fact, I had 150 protesters at that event. But she came and she'd been, I helped her get all over the country, but she'd done already a couple of events. And she has brought her husband the last 2 times, Matthias. And so if you Google her name, my favorite video of her, it's about a 3-minute video. It's from the 700 Club. So she was here, I think that was in 2010. But it was when they first started doing this interfaith thing and bringing all the churches together and then allowing the imams to start off with the call to prayer. Okay? So she was instructed by her Heavenly Father to go to the Martin Luther Cathedral there in Germany when they were doing this big thing, and she didn't know what she was going to do, but she took her German flag, and she had written on it, "One in Jesus Christ." Okay, so she was up in the balcony when the imam began his prayer, and she threw out her flag and said, "This is a Christian nation," you know. And of course they escorted her out. But since then she's been traveling around speaking. And her and her husband, an amazing woman. And so she was here in March. And I went to her last event. She had about 3 or 4 around here that I helped her book. And before she left, she gave me her flag. And she had a friend of hers took and made this flag. It's a homemade flag out of Germany, but it's half the U.S. and half the German flag. And she still had other events to do. Her husband said to her, "Heidi, you're really sure you want to do that?" She goes, "Yes. The Lord is telling me I'm being compelled to give it to Peggy." And she even signed it. There was a little message to me from it. But, you know, that was just an amazing thing. She's an amazing female. I mean, they're an amazing couple. Anyway, with that said, I just want to let you know about the flag there because, you know, I tell you what, Heidi's a huge Trump supporter. So before she left, she had a Trump T-shirt, both her and her husband. And then I gave her a Trump T-shirt at one event, and she's like, "I need a hat, Peggy. I need to go off the airplane in Frankfurt with my." So I went ahead and dig her up a hat. So I gave her that hat at that last event. It was so cool, it was so cute. And because I walked in with mine, she's, "Oh, is that my hat?" I'm like, "No, this is my hat." You know. But so, but I gave it to her at the end of the event, and then she gave me the flag. So. It's now part of this. I figured it was, she's very good friends with Shahram. In fact, the day after she was at my event, she went to Spokane and spent time with Shahram in Spokane. So he didn't get to see the flag. Is this the first time you've seen the flag?
This one, yeah. I saw the other one she had, which was the Israeli
really?
German flag that she made. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So anyway, without any more, that's the extent of my announcements for today, which is amazing for you because I usually can go on forever.
Amen.
He's been married to me too long. Anyway, so without further ado, I want to introduce you to Shahram Hadian. I've known Shahram since probably 2011. It was during the campaign. He ran for governor in 2012. He was the grassroots conservative candidate against Robin Kennedy. So some of you knew him and some of you haven't. But and after that, can I tell him a little bit about?
Sure. Okay.
So one of the really awesome parts of his story is he's Iranian, and his dad knew something was amok in Iran, and so they moved to the West, and his siblings and his mom and dad. And so I think they first came to Canada, or did they first come to the U.S.?
We came to the U.S. first.
Came to the U.S. first, but he was 7. And a month later was when the Shah of Iran died. So he was a police officer up in Everett, and a coach.
Redmond.
Oh, in Redmond.
Yeah.
Okay.
Coach, yeah.
I'm getting close.
That's okay. No problem.
It's been a while since I've heard
wanted to get that one.
It's been a while since I've heard the whole story.
Just wanted to get it right.
So anyway, after the campaign, his wife, and I guess the Lord was moving him, he moved to Spokane and started his church. And I have had the pleasure of running into him at an event. I think that was 2 years ago, maybe 3 now.
Yeah.
It's out in Marble Country, which is very northeastern Washington, almost to the Canadian border, and it's called God Country Family. It's a weekend retreat. An amazing experience. And what was really cool is I went with my representative and his whole family. I went with Jesse and Jenny and all the kids, and so that's how closely I've gone to the opportunity of knowing my representatives. So, anyway, without further ado, Shahram Hadian, please help me welcome.
First question, do you guys, can you hear me okay, or do you need a mic?
Yeah,
We're good? Okay. If not, if I don't have to hold anything, that would be great. My kids always joke with me that, Dad, what would you do if you didn't have your arms? Because I talk with my arms. It's hard enough. You should see me when I'm on the phone. You would not know any difference. So, well, first of all, Peggy, thank you for the introduction, and thank you guys for inviting me here to be back with the Tea Party Patriots here. As she said, it was always a great blessing during the campaign to come down, and we would come. And I've been in this room 3, 4, 5 times. I can't remember how many times. A lot of times we were here for the campaign and giving on the campaign stop, and that was just a great journey, great experience. And we were with Peggy and her folks down in Olympia several times, and so it's really awesome. So it's just a blessing to be back, especially since, as she said, we're over at Spokane now. Let me put this other slide up. She gave a little information on my background. And we're in Spokane now, and I'm pastoring there. We moved with our family over there about 3 years ago now, and that's been a real great move for us, and just getting our church established there. But also from there, really expanding our ministry. God's really opened the door for us to take this message and my story really now across the nation and into other nations of the world. And it's just been amazing to watch. But part of it is because I do believe there is a growing hunger and a growing desire for the truth to be spoken. That's why our ministry is called the TIL Project, Truth and Love Project, for us to speak the truth in love. And obviously one of the main things that I speak on with our ministry is my background that Peggy just mentioned. Being from Iran, having been born as a Muslim, my family was and is Muslim. My dad was more culturally Muslim. You know, he was in the military. He was a military guy under the. Yeah, I know that one. We tried, and apparently it didn't.
Is that too dark for all of you, or do you need light?
No, you're okay. I'm okay if you're okay. If you don't fall, promise us you won't fall asleep.
Okay, we were wondering. She wants you to use the mic. We're all doing a sound check.
Oh,
Some of them,
use the mic. Okay.
you got to hold the button in the bottom. So you get everything right? Okay,
Yep,
good.
there it is. Okay, we'll use the mic. Is that better?
Is that too loud? I can
No,
turn
is
it
that
down.
good? No? Okay. I'll try not to yell. Anyway, so my dad was in the military. So, you know, they knew that things were shifting in Iran back, unfortunately, with the election of Jimmy Carter. That really was the change. And the policy of the United States against Iran started changing. And my dad retired and was planning on getting us out a couple of years after when we actually left. But things got very heated, and we left in December of 1978. Really just packed up our bags and fled Iran. And less than 6 weeks later, the government was overthrown. So the reason I share my story is because when we're talking about what we're seeing in America and around the world, particularly with the dangers of Islam, I'm sharing from personal experience. I'm not sharing from something I read in the book. This is what I saw firsthand in my birth country. You know, Iran was a monarchy under the Shah. It was a secular government, even though it was majority Muslim populated. When Khomeini came in 1979, within 6 months they established an Islamic constitution under Sharia. And that began to obviously erode all whatever freedoms were there before. So when I've witnessed my birth country's government change, and people in Iran lose their freedoms, and as we speak today, there's a amazing growing Christian church in Iran now. Many believe that it's the largest growing church in the world because of great persecution. As we speak, there are over 100 Iranians who are Christians in prison in Iran for their faith. But the freedoms that were before the Shah were lost. And so this is something, again, that I've witnessed. It's not something that is just theory. And my heart for America, our home, is that it doesn't go down the same road. But I stand here before you tonight saying, we're going down that road rapidly, right? Rapidly. And I do believe that the election of President Trump was a reprieve from God. That the Lord put his hand against the destruction that would have been imminent. I mean, I don't know how much more information can come out against crooked Hillary before we realize how crooked they are. I mean, just the other day, Donna Brazile comes out and says they rigged the election. They're even admitting it. I mean, this is beyond criminal. This is the most criminal element that we've seen. They make the mafia look like, Boy Scouts. And yet, nothing sticks. Right? Nothing sticks. We are now in a state of lawlessness. And so, there's a lot of stuff going on. I believe God gave us a reprieve. And now we have to make it count. We have to work to turn things back. But as you've seen, the swamp does not go away easily, does it? The swamp is fighting back. It's deep-rooted. It's going to take a time. And not only will it take our activism, but it will take our prayers. And if you are believers and you are people of prayer and faith, we have to be on our knees and we have to be interceding. And we talked about this with our church in Spokane. We said, look, we're going to commit to pray last year. And we're going to accept whatever happens, but we're going to pray. And God moved. And we believe God moved. And it's sad to see many Christians who are so against this president and what he's trying to do, and stuff that he hasn't been able to do, where the corrupt system, like our courts, have been fighting back. So, just the other thing I wanted to mention about my background, as Peggy mentioned, as a police officer, I was a Redmond, currently pastor again in Spokane Valley there, our church. But obviously the biggest change happened in my life in 1999 when I became a Christian. Leaving Islam, that means I'm an apostate. I deserve the death penalty. And so I shared this because this is why our freedoms matter. I was able to leave Islam and become a Christian in America. Had I done that in Iran, I'd be in prison right now. Maybe even dead. And if we're under Islamic rule, last night I gave a presentation in Renton at the Tea Party there on the presentation that I have on the back table. This one here, where is it? It's called Islam's Assault on the U.S. Constitution, which I'll briefly reference tonight. And we're talking about why Sharia, Islamic law, why it's antithetical to our Constitution. And for no other reason, apostasy. If Islam teaches that you must be killed if you leave the religion, then how can there be freedom of religion? Does that make sense? Common sense, right? No emotions, no hatred, no bigotry. We're not trying to be Islamophobes. It's just common sense. So in America, the beauty of our republic is you have freedom of religion. You don't have to believe anything, but if I choose to leave Islam and become a Christian in this nation, nobody hunted me down and tried to kill me. Thank God for that. Yet. Right? Isn't that a thank God? Amen? Right? Amen. And that's what we're fighting for. That's why this is so important. For us to stand up for those type of values that you don't see in Iran or in the Middle East, in other parts of the world. So that's a huge part of my story. I have, since 2012, I've been traveling across the country. The ministry keeps expanding. I've also worked with legislators in multiple states. I just came back from Minnesota where I gave, actually the presentation I gave last night, I gave to some legislators there. I do law enforcement training now on counterterrorism with those individual agency training, because you'll see tonight we desperately need to restore our counterterrorism, our national security. That's why what this president is doing I support, and yet they're being fought at. I mean, I cannot believe how many people buy into this lie that you have somebody that says, we need to restore our borders and our boundaries. You're a racist. We need to build a wall. You hate Mexicans. What? We need to be able to protect our immigration system. You're a xenophobe. This is lunacy. And we we've got to not let these name calling affect us and focus on what matters, which is to secure our nation. And I, for one, I'm a firm believer. We got to stop going over there and try to nation build and do all the, listen, the Islamic world doesn't do well with democracy. They never have. Because democracy to Islam is absolutely haram. It is forbidden because it's man's way.
Islam ultimately wants to function under a theocracy, like in Iran. That's what Iran is. So I think it's time to focus on the homeland. I think it's time to... Listen, by the way, this is a biblical concept. The Bible says it is important for us to get our house in order. You know, as a pastor, I can't be a pastor according to the Bible and pastor a church if my own house is in disarray. Does that make sense? That's a common sense concept. Right? How do you go help other people when your own house is in turmoil? Doesn't make sense. You can't help others when your own house is in disarray. So how can we help the world when our own nation is in disarray? So I support what this president is doing. Okay, let's move on. Tonight's presentation, Sabotaging America, Islam's March Towards Supremacy. I didn't title this presentation for the purpose of trying to be inflammatory, even though that's what I've been accused of, and the media loves to do that. I titled it because that's specific language from the preeminent Muslim organization in the world, that is the Muslim Brotherhood. This is, by the way, their Arabic symbol on their website. On their English website, it has lots of nice things. On their Arabic website, it has the two swords with the Quran, with the Arabic word prepare. What are they preparing for? They're preparing for jihad. They're preparing for whatever it takes to be able to establish. The Brotherhood, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this part of it, but I actually recently did some radio shows on that. We now have a radio show called Truth and Love Radio. If you're interested, just go to our website. You can listen to it right there on the website. But I did some radio shows on the backstory of the Muslim Brotherhood and how they were tied to the Nazis. How they worked together. They had a common enemy, the Jews. And if you go back and look at that, in 1928, when the Muslim Brotherhood was birthed, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the founder, Hassan al-Banna, said that this is a revivalist movement. What are they trying to revive? The caliphate. Does that make sense? The whole purpose of the Brotherhood coming together was to restore a global caliphate. However, they said, we have a problem. When we've done caliphates as an empire or a nation, it's easily destroyed, right? If you know there's an army from a country and they have a uniform, it's easier to fight your enemy. But when the enemy blends in and they do things like rent Home Depot trucks, it's pretty hard to know your enemy. When your enemy, when we help them come into this nation out of supposed compassion and diversity, remember the diversity lottery program, and they turn on us, we can't identify our enemy. So the Brotherhood said, we need to become transnational. A nation state is too easy to destroy. We need to become transnational. And if the Ikhwan, they call the Ikhwan or the Brotherhood, can be transnational, meaning from many nations and many parts of the world, we're much harder to defeat. And that is born true. Because the Brotherhood is as strong as ever today as they were in 1928 when they started. Now, here's a few things we're going to hopefully try to establish tonight in this presentation. We're going to establish some, or I guess maybe a better way of saying it, answer some questions. Does Islam want to sabotage America? Is Islam peaceful? Is ISIS Islamic? Is Islam a supremacist ideology that calls for the subjugation of non-Muslims, specifically Christians and Jews? Can Islam be protected under the Constitution? And much more that we'll cover in the second half. Now, let's dig into this by making sure that we cover our source documents, because I get accused a lot of making stuff up, and that's not accurate, so I want to make sure that we're very accurate. Now, where's my other... oh, it's right here. I'm sorry. It's hard to see in the dark. Okay, so number one source that we're going to be quoting tonight when we talk about Islam is from the Quran. That's supposed to be the holy book of Islam. I cover this quite a bit in my other teachings, that it's a very... the word that I want to say there is that it is unauthenticated. It is the most unauthenticated religious text in the world. The Quran has one witness, that's Muhammad. It has no original copied manuscripts. There's no original copied manuscripts of the Quran. One person had revelation of it, that's Muhammad, so nobody else witnessed it. He said it, they do it. And conveniently enough, the Quran teaches that if you question Allah or the Prophet, not only could you be killed eventually if you become an unbeliever, but you go to hell. Isn't that convenient? And just hang on for the questions if we can to the end, because we have a lot to cover. But so the couple of things again, online source. This is an online source that you can use if you want to look up verses, because this is what Muslims use. Most Muslims, over 80% of the world's Muslims, don't speak Arabic. They have to learn Arabic. So this is a website that is authenticated for Muslims. So if you use a verse from here, it has the top translations of Arabic to English, they can't criticize you. Does that make sense? Now, if you want a paper copy of the Quran, please don't go to Barnes & Nobles or Amazon and get one. A friend of mine named Usama Datdog, he's an Egyptian Christian, he has produced a translation of the Quran from Arabic to English that I trust. I trust them, I trust those he worked with. And this Quran is available on his website. We don't get a kickback or anything like that, but his website is called thestraightway.org. Thestraightway.org. And we will soon, somebody asked me last night, soon I'll put a link. We'll put a link from our website to his website if you want to go order this copy. Because if you get a Quran from the bookstore here or from Amazon, it's whitewashed. It is westernized and whitewashed, and you're not going to be able to learn anything. Now, the mistake that we make when we're evaluating Islam, somebody asked me last night a great question. They said, well, I wanted to invite my neighbor to come and talk about the threat of Sharia law, but they said, oh, most Muslims are peaceful, and you're just making stuff up, and the Quran is peaceful. I go, ask them, where do they get that notion from? Have they read the Quran? Have they read the other sources of Islam? The mistake we make is we think the Quran is the only source. That's a huge mistake. The Quran is one source. Yes, it is the initial primary source, but there's a bigger source than the Quran, and his name is Muhammad. The Sunnah, the word there, Sunnah, means the practice. Muslims are committed or commanded to follow the Sunnah because this is the practice of Muhammad. Why would they have to follow Muhammad so closely? I already told you. He's the only one who got revelation. Right? Are we good? We're awake? Okay, make sure. The lights get too much, let me know, we'll turn them back on. He's the only one who got revelation. Well, since he's the only one who got revelation, every Muslim's got to follow him. They've got to imitate him. There are two sources of the Sunnah. One is called the Hadith and one is called the Sirah. These are their Arabic meanings, tradition and biography. Again, this is all about Muhammad. Now, what percentage of Islamic text is the Sunnah? 86%. If you add the percentage of text of the Hadith and Sirah, that adds up to 86% of Islamic text. So the way to understand it is, 86% of all Islamic text is about Muhammad. Only 14% of Islamic text, including the Quran, is about Allah, their God. Isn't that kind of troubling? That troubled me as a Muslim. But remember, you can't doubt it. You can't question it. Because to be a good Muslim, you don't question Muhammad. You don't question. So that's problematic. Now, the third source that we're going to cite is the Sharia. The Sharia means the sacred path. And there's a book here called The Reliance of the Traveler. I recommend this to you. The problem is you can't get a copy of it anymore, at least for the time being. Because we believe this distributor has stopped printing it because they know how damaging this is to their lives. Because this is a compilation of Islamic law. It is 1,000 years of case law put together, and it is certified by the top Islamic scholars in the world, including Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt. And it is the orthodox source. Now, Muslims are two major groups, Sunni and Shia, right? The Sunni are the majority. That's about 83-84% of the world's Muslims. Shia are about 13 to 14%. This is a Shia source, a Sunni source, but it does also have a section on the majors with the Shia Muslims. That there's not a lot they disagree on the majors of Islam. The biggest difference is on the successors of Muhammad, what are called the caliphs, the Rashidun caliphs after Muhammad. So, we're going to be citing from the Reliance of the Traveler. When you cite from the Quran, Muslim apologists, those who want to defend Islam, including some Christians, will say, oh, you don't speak Arabic. Sorry, you don't understand what the Quran says. as if I can't find an Arabic-speaking friend who can read the Quran. I go, but hold on now. These are, remember, authenticated sources that we are citing. Quran.com is authenticated by the top Islamic scholars, and because many American Muslims, Western Muslims, who don't speak Arabic, go to that site to read the Quran or to look up verses. Number two, they'll say, when you cite the Sunnah, well, those are some obscure ones. Well, we're going to cite for you only authenticated, the top authenticated Sunnahs. But when you bring in the Reliance, the Sharia law book, really the argument is over. The case is closed. They just can't refute it. Because if the Reliance says something is Islamic, and it is certified by the top Islamic scholars of the oldest Islamic institution in the world, it's Islamic. Does that make sense? And so the argument's over. That's why we think they're not publishing them anymore. Because they got wind of the fact that it was being used against them. So, if anybody is interested, please don't bombard me and be patient. But if you send me an email, we have an electronic copy that we downloaded. It's not great because it was scanned, but at least it's something. And we can distribute that. We don't charge anything. I mean, we can send you the PDF. It is 1,200 pages or something like that, but in case you want to have a copy of it. But it is a very effective source. And I was actually handing these out to law enforcement, to some elected officials. We were getting them and handing them out until the distributor went blank. Okay, let's talk about the Brotherhood here. Now, I'm going to be citing from a document called the Explanatory Memorandum. How many of you in this room have heard about this document? A few of you, only about 4 or 5. Okay, we got to change that. And by the way, there's a reason for that. So we don't. Unfortunately, the distributor messed up and didn't get the copies to us in time. So if you do want a copy of this, we can take your order tonight. And my second handsome son. I have 3 sons and a daughter. Elias is my second one. He's my little mini-me, you can tell by our resemblance to each other. He can get you signed up and we can send it directly to your house if you want a copy of this, because I'm going to be referencing this quite a bit. Now, brief background. This document, okay, Muslim Brotherhood came into the United States starting in the late 1950s. Their oldest organization in the U.S. is the Muslim Student Association, on many of the campuses, college campuses, university campuses in America. 1991, they write this document called the Explanatory Memorandum. Basically, their strategy for their plans in America. 2004, after some good police work, a guy by the name of Ibrahim El-Barasi, him and his wife were taking pictures of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. A trooper sees them, stops. Long story short, they find out there's a warrant. They do a search warrant on his house. Under the basement, they find a sub-basement, I think like 70 some odd boxes of materials, including this document. How can I explain this document to you? This is their playbook. So we hit the jackpot. Imagine during the time of the rise of communism in America, because it's still very much alive. Imagine if we got the playbook. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's gold, right? So we got the playbook. And as they go through the playbook, they start understanding how deep the network is. Because in their explanatory, not only does it give the mission statement, it gives you all their front groups. It tells you who their groups are. Thank you! So they had the jackpot. So based on this information, which was entered, they were able to discover the network, including the fact that there was a charity, fake charity, in Texas called the Holy Land Foundation that was funneling millions of dollars to Hamas. Of course, Hamas is a terrorist organization. That's a federal offense. So they indict 5 members of the Brotherhood. They get them, and they send them to jail. Now they're getting ready to go after the front groups. So they get indictments ready, and they're ready to go after groups like ISNA and CARE and all these other front groups. And we have a regime change. Right? Comrade Obama comes into the White House. That should tell you how I feel about our Muslim Comrade Obama. and Mr. Holder in the Justice Department. They shut the trial down. All of a sudden, the evidence is gone. We don't know where the evidence is. Here's the challenge. All these groups are ready to be indicted. What happens to them? They're now labeled as unindicted co-conspirators. They just sit there. By the way, CARE in 2011 tried to get their name off that list. They went before a federal judge and said, that's not fair. We want our name off. And somehow that federal judge looked at the evidence and said, nope, there's plenty of evidence. You're staying on the list. So to this day, groups like CARE are still unindicted co-conspirators in the largest terror financing trial in American history. The problem is this document is no longer available to our elected officials and our law enforcement community because it was purged. I'll explain that a little bit later. Now, I want to read the mission statement because I think if you get the playbook of your enemy who wants to destroy you, you should know their mission statement. Don't you think so? Good thing to know. So here's what they say on page 7 of the explanatory. The process of settlement as a civilization jihad is a process with all the word means. The Ikhwan or the Brotherhood must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad and here's where the kumbaya goes out the window, okay? So if you're expecting tonight to be kind of coexist and kumbaya, I'm sorry, you came to the wrong group. It's going to go out the window. In eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and, what? Can you read it? Sabotaging its miserable house. Whose house? That's our house. Talking about America. They're going to come from within, and they're going to work to sabotage until they eliminate it. What part of that does not sound like sedition and treason? By the way, the reason I named this presentation Sabotaging America is because it's their words. And the media went apoplectic on me. Oh, what an inflammatory title against Muslims. No, what's inflammatory is the Muslim Brotherhood. They're the ones who are inflammatory. If anybody should be kicked out of America, it should be them. So, they want to sabotage. Now, watch this. Who are they going to use? Who's that? That's us, their hands. And the hands of the believers, that's the Muslims, so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all the religions. You see, that's the ultimate goal. In fact, the Reliance for the Traveler teaches that jihad, it defines jihad as a war against non-Muslims. That's a definition from the word mujahada. And it says jihad will continue against anybody who is an unbeliever until, it says, Jesus will come back. You go, oh, what? Yeah, Muslims believe in Jesus too, except it's a false Jesus. How many Christians are following for that one? So many. So many it's grieving. So the Reliance teaches that jihad will continue until Jesus comes back and establishes Islam across the planet. The Jewish Jesus apparently is a Muslim. We missed that somewhere down the road. I must have missed that in the Bible. And he's going to help establish. So then that's when jihad will end. Because the war against non-Muslims will end. Until that time, it's going to continue. Because the end goal isn't just to take down nations. It's to establish the religion of Islam, Allah, over all the religions, and their law. So what's the end goal? Every nation under Islam, under Sharia. Now, it goes on to say, understanding, we are not up to this challenge and have not prepared ourselves for jihad yet. It is a Muslim's destiny to perform jihad and work wherever he is and wherever he lands until the final hour comes. Again, that's when Jesus is going to come back according to their eschatology. And there is no escape from that destiny except for those who choose to slack. But would the slackers and the mujahideen be equal? Obviously the Brotherhood is sending a message to their people, right? This document was saying, listen, you Muslims in America, if you're serious about our goal, don't be a slacker. We got to engage in jihad and be like the mujahideen. The word jihad comes from the word mujahada, which is where you get the word mujahideen. Does that make sense? Yep. So this is their mission statement. Does this mission statement sound coexist?
No.
Does this mission statement sound peaceful and we want to just be tolerant as CARE operates in Washington State, as the Muslim Brotherhood operates here in Washington State? Did I lose the mic? I think I lost the mic. The battery, I think, went dead. As they operate here in Washington State, they go around telling everybody how it's, about civil rights and we just want to get along. Yet this is their mission statement. Nobody knows it's their mission statement because the document has been purged. Okay? So, let's talk a little bit about the Brotherhood's operations. Number one, they have many front groups. I've mentioned a few already. You're familiar with CARE, Council on American-Islamic Relations, Islamic Society of North America, Islamic Circle of North America, Muslim Student Association, Muslim American Society. Those are some of the most well-known. Again, how do we know these are their front groups? Because the explanatory memorandum document says these are their front groups. You don't have to guess. You don't have to be a rocket scientist or have top security clearance. It tells you. Now, there's another one that I want to bring your attention to. That is the North American Islamic Trust. North American Islamic Trust, Nate, is an entity of the Brotherhood that owns the deeds to over 70% of the mosques in America. So the majority of the mosques in America are owned by the Brotherhood. Now, we had a little fun, myself and another Christian speaker, in April of this year in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where we had a Christian event that we were having a conference there, over a 500 people packed room. Because our ministry, the Truth and Love Project Ministry, a Christian ministry and a Christian church, this year got added. Well, last year we got added to CARE's list called the Islamophobia Network. We're part of 41 organizations that are Islamophobia centered. But this year, 2017, we got added to the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of hate groups. The Till Project is one of 11 hate groups in the state of Washington. Us, Act for America, the rest are KKK, neo-Nazi, skinhead groups. So a Christian church and a Christian ministry has been added to the SPLC hate list. Yet there's not one Muslim Brotherhood organization on the SPLC hate list. There's not one BLM affiliate, Black Lives Matter, that is on that list. There's not one Antifa group. Even though the FBI now is labeling Antifa as domestic terrorists, they're not on those hate group lists. And of course the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is all about poverty, except that we found out that they have $308 million in assets that they're funneling over to the Cayman Islands, but they're all about, the little guy.
Right.
And if you remember, the CNN put that hate map out publicly, which then several Christian organizations have sued the SPLC now. We're too small to do that. We don't have the means to do that. But some of the larger Christian organizations, good for them, actually filed a lawsuit of slander and defamation against SPLC because they're not just saying, hey, we're a hate group. They're saying we're inciting violence. They're claiming that we're inciting violence and we're trying to encourage white people to get armed and go kill Muslims. Because if you come to my presentation, that's exactly what you heard. Not. No matter how many times I say, as a former Muslim, my heart is to reach Muslims with the gospel of Jesus Christ. My heart is to bring them out of the darkness of Islam. Yes, we're gonna expose Islam. Yes, we're gonna talk negatively about Islam because Islam is negative. But I always encourage people, please don't blanket Muslims. Don't go and hate the individual Muslim. But the SPLC is warped and deranged. And now, the SPLC put us on a hate list. The Islamic Center of Sioux Falls had a meeting the week before and said, hey, here's a group of these are a list of hate groups. Invited the media. Oh, by the way, one of these hate speakers is coming to town next week. So they decided to protest us. So we had protests planned. No big deal. Okay, we're used to that. And the local mosque protested. But when I did some digging on the local mosque, we found out not only had they had outreach events the month before to law enforcement and elected officials, that the gal there that is part of that mosque, Taniza Islam, was formerly working with CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood. She's a lawyer. She's very politically active in trying to put Muslim causes. But we did a little research and found out that the property of the mosque is owned by, are you ready for it? Drum roll, the North American Islamic Trust, the Muslim Brotherhood. Now that took us all about 30 minutes to find that information out. But when, in the middle of our conference, remember, we did the protesters were there, and we had hired some law enforcement to come inside the building. But when in the middle of our conference, a Muslim man comes in who we now know was armed, videotaping his Quran, scanning the crowd. He was interrupted by law enforcement. He was asked to leave. When they asked him, because they could see that he had a weapon on him, he was asked to leave the building. He lied about his name. He goes out in the car, makes subsequent... These are, by the way, these videos were live on Facebook. They were live. And he made 4 videos in total. The second one in his vehicle outside the conference. While the conference is still going on, he brandishes 5 weapons, including an AR-15, an AK-47, 3 handguns with extended mags, and now we know he had 1,200 rounds of ammunition in his car, and he makes threat after threat. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, be effing terrified to us. He makes another video in the parking lot, goes back to his apartment, makes another video with halal bullets naming us at the conference. These are for you. And when we found out about it, the law enforcement of Sioux Falls didn't want us to know the videos existed.
Yeah.
The next day we were told by the prosecutor, this man did nothing wrong. He was simply exercising his First Amendment right and his Second Amendment right. Now, the FBI and the Joint Terrorism Task Force did a token visit where they asked this guy, because the FBI wouldn't know jihadi terrorist if it hit him in the head now. And I say that with respect to the fact that I know friends of mine who I have colleagues who work in the FBI. Good people. But it's become so corrupt now. They went to visit him, and they asked him this idiotic question. Did you have intent to harm anybody? What does he say? No. He says, I was upset. I was heartbroken. Yeah, because all of us, when we're heartbroken, we carry around 5 weapons, 1,200 rounds of ammo in our car, right? Imagine the scenario. Flip it. Flip the scenario. White guy with his Bible, videotapes his Bible, goes into a Muslim conference. By the way, usually in these situations, you don't know if they're Muslim, you know? The media doesn't want to say they're Muslim. This guy did us a favor. He was wearing a shirt that says, I'm an American, I'm a Muslim. I open carry, I conceal carry, I don't have a problem with you unless you're stupid. That's what his shirt said. He was bragging on Facebook that he's 25,000 rounds deep in training. He had jihadi stuff on his Facebook page, and yet none of this was connected by the law enforcement community. And Sioux Falls Police Department had a Joint Terrorism Task Force. I'm telling you, they couldn't see a foot ahead of them if it smacked them in the face. And it's not just that, it's worse. It's fear. It's cowardice. And I say that as a former police officer. With all due respect to them. I say it as a former police officer. Because when they tell us he did nothing wrong, it was political correctness, it was politics. We found out later, by the way, this guy was Saudi. And we found out later that 2 years earlier, a Saudi billionaire prince had come into town and spent $208 million investing in a local company that builds firefighting equipment for the country of Saudi Arabia. It's all money, right? Follow the money. Just like with the refugee resettlement stuff. Follow the money. It's all about money, and it's fraud. So, on day 8, Sioux Falls Police Department, again, goes public and says he did nothing wrong. We decide after we get off the road, because we were still on the road. We had 4 other nights where we're speaking at in other cities. And when we get to the next city, we were met by the police department. And they go, we heard about you. How? Here's a bulletin from the FBI. My picture, Brandon's picture, and this guy's picture. And we had that in multiple cities. So we got off the road and we realized they're not going to do anything. This is a moment that I want you to understand. I'm not trying to hype this up because of us. I want you to understand this was a moment where we can either tuck our tails between our legs and go off into the sunset, or we can stand and fight. 500 Christians were threatened. And the local police and the prosecutor and the local elected officials said it was not a threat. This man did nothing wrong. You and I know that if it was a white guy, Christian guy, militia guy with the Bible in a Muslim conference, it would have been international news. Right? Yeah. They would have thrown the book at the person. He did nothing wrong. So we decided we're going to go public. We recorded TV shows, we wrote an article, we went public with all the videos. We had downloaded all the videos off of Facebook that he had made. And then the story got picked up, first by Jihad Watch, and then Pamela Geller, and then John Guandolo, and then Breitbart, and then The Blaze, and Daily Caller, and then the Daily Mail in the UK, and then the Israeli Times. And the whole time we're telling people, forget the local guy, call the Attorney General of the state of South Dakota to act. And on day 12, the Attorney General of the state of South Dakota issued an arrest warrant for this guy. On day 12, it was the Attorney General. By the way, he was running for governor. He is running still for governor. It took that. And of course, the Attorney General said, it had nothing to do with public pressure. We were still investigating this case. No, you weren't, because if you were investigating as a police officer, former police officer, I will tell you, if you're investigating and you're still building a case, you don't go publicly and say to the public, this guy did nothing wrong. Because any decent defense attorney would go to court and say, Your Honor, this is a political witch hunt because my client's a Muslim, because they came out on day 2 and day 3 and day 8 and said to the media that he did nothing wrong. So why now are they arresting him? It's a witch hunt. When they arrested him, they charged him with a terroristic threat. They found he had meth in his system at the time. They found he had meth in his apartment. He got brought up and now has been found guilty of federal drug charges and firearm charges. He will no longer be able to have a weapon, at least legally. He cannot vote. However, we're still waiting on a preliminary trial. That was in April. We're still waiting for a preliminary trial in South Dakota for the terroristic threat charges. We don't think it's going to come. And when they arrested him, they gave him a $2,500 bail. So, just to give you perspective of what we're dealing with, we knew that if we did not go public with that story, regardless of what the outcome was, I felt, and I told my wife, and I told my family, and I told Brandon, the other guy who was with me, and I said, look, because it was his conference that I was invited to, I said, look, I'm not going to be guilty of the blood of anybody because of fear. And by the way, by going public, guess what? We're now on certain jihadi websites and are talked about. So your profile gets higher and you become more of a target. But you know what? I do it again and again and again and again because it's the right thing to do. Because we have to have courage to stand up. Brandon said to me a line. Praise be to God. Brandon said to me a line that I thought was really good after the bail amounts was set. And he went public with this and he said this. He said, now we know the price of the life of a Christian in America. $5. 500 people, $2,500 bail. $5. Do you think if a white guy had threatened the Muslim conference, a Christian had threatened the Muslim conference, he would have gotten $2,500 in bail? $1 million or no bail.
Yeah.
He would have the book thrown at them. And every media outlet in the country would have covered that story. Militia, gun-toting, white guy with the Bible threatens Muslim conference. Just imagine the headlines. But because you flip it around. Folks, if we don't wake up, conservatives and Christians, we're the target. We're the target. And if we allow stuff like that to stand, we can't. We're not going to be able to survive. And by the way, guess what they're trying to do with our meetings? Protest, shut it down, create an environment where we have to have so much security that we're not going to be able to meet. And that's what they're doing with main speakers. They just shut down an event in Sioux Falls. There's a guy that I know from Minnesota who's going to go speak in Sioux Falls. The public place that he had agreed to have the meeting canceled on him within several hours. Several hours because of why? Public pressure. When I was in Minnesota back in September, 3 out of the 4 nights I spoke there were protested. The 4th night, the event, the owner of the building was getting calls at home trying to cancel the event. That's what we're up against. So we better buckle up. We better buckle up and get ready, both spiritually and physically to get ready. Because this is what we're facing now. And with November 4th around the corner and Antifa and all the talk, by the way, there was a great article that came out, a guy named Ed Klein is coming, I think he came out of the book or is coming out of the book, where the FBI had done an investigation and they're now connecting the dots. There was members of Antifa that had gone over to Germany, and they believe they've met with ISIS. So if we're taking Antifa as a joke, it's no joke. These are no longer the bleeding heart liberals that just want to hold signs up and say, we just love everybody. These guys are training, they're doing hand-to-hand combat, they have self-defense training, they're doing weapons training, and they're fully funded. We know Soros money, we know globalist money, we know the Islamic network, the Muslim Brotherhood is working with Antifa, the Muslim Brotherhood is working with Black Lives Matter. This is all now reality. And they're fomenting what? Revolution. Now we have to not fall for the violence. We have to make sure we don't meet violence with unnecessary violence. I mean, obviously I'm talking about defense, right? We're going to defend ourselves, but this is what we're talking about. Okay, let's move on very quickly. One of the reasons we know that the Brotherhood is getting more active is because they've created now basically a pseudo-political organization called the USCMO, United States Council of Muslim Organizations. Here's our buddy Nihad Awad, the head of CARE. They're getting very politically active. Now, you guys know this guy, right? Keith Ellison, right? From our buddy from Minnesota, who's now the DNC vice chair, who was the first guy that put his hand on the Quran, right? Remember Jefferson's Quran, and it was being celebrated. Like, we got to know our history, right? We got to know our history about the Barbary Pirates and the Barbary Wars. But the Muslim Brotherhood is getting way more political locally, especially. This year they created something called the JET PAC, Justice Education Technology PAC, where they're looking at local elections, city council, mayor, county commissioner, and they're focusing on liberal causes. They're running under a social justice platform. The environment, education, pro-choice, pro-LGBT rights. And you're going, well, Muslims don't believe some of that stuff, do they? They do when they're in the house of war, where they're going to lie and deceit to get themselves elected. So, we have here an example of Ilhan Omar. She's the first Somali Muslim, elected to the Minnesota legislature. She's so popular in the Muslim community, they made a hijabi out of her. You know Barbie? It's the hijabi. It's the Muslim version of Barbie. I'm not making this stuff up. Here is Michigan. Abdullah Hammoud getting sworn in as a legislator. His hand is on the Quran. If you're going to put your hand on the Quran, then in my opinion your oath of office is as good as toilet paper. You're going to lie. You don't even have to try to lie. Well, actually, they're not even lying. Their allegiance is to the Quran. And you don't think the Quran is antithetical to the Constitution? And to the Bible, right? Here you have this guy. Pay attention. How many of you heard of Abdul El-Sayed? Okay? They're calling him Obama 2.0. He's a 32-year-old, good-looking, Middle Eastern, well-spoken doctor who's running for governor in Michigan, openly Muslim, right? See, they're not hiding anymore. At least Obama tried to hide his Muslim background, his Muslim allegiance. They're not hiding anymore. They're openly running. And they're running on left-leaning, liberal, social justice causes. They're going to get a lot of Democrat votes, they're going to get a lot of independent votes, they're going to get a lot of Rhino Republican votes. So CARE has backed him. The Brotherhood has backed him. The Democrat Party has, of course, backed him. And we're getting word that certain Catholic organizations are going to back him if he gets through the primary. Oh, actually, I think he's already through the primary. Why would Catholic organizations be backing them? Because when you look at interfaith dialogue and interfaith coalitions, as I experienced in Minnesota, one of the largest members of these interfaith coalitions are the Catholic churches. As you know, the Pope has been very open about ecumenicalism. He believes Islam is an Abrahamic faith. We serve basically the same God. So a lot of this ecumenicalism is bleeding over politically. So don't be surprised if by 2020 or 2024 you see a Muslim running for president. It sounds far-fetched, doesn't it? But it's not. But pay attention, because what problem is local races. In Spokane, I was saying this last night or the night before, in Spokane, our voter turnout right now, because it's 2017, right? It's not a midterm election, it's not a presidential year. Our voter turnout right now is about 8 to 9% voter turnout. So a lot of these races, right, they have a very small voter turnout. If they get their folks to show up, and we're not paying attention, all of a sudden you have Hamtramck, Michigan, where you have the first Muslim majority city council in America. All of a sudden you have, oh, no, that's okay, you know what, let's leave it on just for a second. Is that okay? You have, we'll kind of go off and on. Just give you a chance to wake up and then go back to sleep. Wake up and then go back to sleep. So these are things that we got to be aware of and be active. But here's what ultimately the point that I'm trying to say. The fact that the Muslim Brotherhood is going hyper-political is indicating that they're getting closer to the upper house. They're not getting weaker, they're getting stronger. And when they go political in nature, because Islam is political in its nature. And you're going to see, as I'll cover later, they're not going to deny Sharia anymore. They're now defending Sharia and even promoting it. Now, with that said, hang on to that, we'll come back to that. I want to quickly cover, and again, what I'm going to share here is in our DVD called Unveiling the True Face of Islam, the red one. So again, I'm just touching on bits and pieces of it tonight. But I got to cover these two arguments, because the argument is, well, Shahram, you don't understand. Look, we know there's radical Islam or these radical elements, but Islam is peaceful and tolerant, and the majority of Muslims are peaceful and tolerant. So get over it, stop saying all these lies, and move on. Go do something else. Believe me, there are days that I wish I was doing something else. So here's the question. Obama came out last year and said, in a speech in the mosque in Baltimore, Islam not only has a 1,000-year history of peace. I was like, really? Really?
Where was I?
Yeah, what books was I reading? But the word Islam itself means peace. I was like, really? Now, I have termed, I don't know if anybody else has, this is my terminology for our former president, who should be in an orange jumpsuit, in my opinion. He is the greatest, he's the Islam's best known apologist. He's not the best at it, but he's the best known. Because you will never find a quote from him anywhere. I've tried. With him saying anything derogatory about Islam. Never. In fact, he praises it, glorifies it, right? But how many times, as a Christian, did he criticize Christianity?
All the time.
All the time, right? Because he's such a good Christian.
Yeah.
So, Obama's saying this, you got to take it with a grain of salt. What does the word Islam itself mean? The word Islam in the Arabic word aslama means surrendered one. One who is surrendered or submitted. So you go, where does the concept of Islamic peace come from? Islamic peace comes when everybody is surrendered. Very simple concept. You want to have peace with Islam? Surrender to Islam. Who's ready to sign up? Nobody better raise their hands. So if you and I choose not to have peace with Islam, this is why the notion that there's a radical Islam implies that somewhere there's a peaceful Islam. If there's a radical version, that means somewhere with the unicorns and the fairy tales and the leprechauns, at the end of the rainbow, there is this version of Islam that exists out there somewhere that is peaceful. And if we just go back to that version, everything would be wonderful. We'd have world peace. We'd all hold hands and sing songs and get along. And for 1,400 years, societies have been trying to get along with Islam. Hasn't gone very well for them. The only way in history Islam has ever been pushed back is by force. They understand no other land. Now, am I talking about the Joe Blow individual Muslim down the road? No. We don't know who the Joe Blow individual Muslim is. The Joe Blow individual Muslim could be like my dad, who was a non-practicing lukewarm Muslim. Lukewarm. He ate pork, he drank alcohol, never went to the mosque, he smoked. You asked him, are you a Muslim? Yes. Dad, when were you ever a Muslim? So when I was trying to share Christ with him until his deathbed back in 2011 when he passed away, I would ask him in all respect, Dad, when have you ever been a Muslim? You're simply identifying as a cultural Muslim. which opened his heart to Christ. Because he thought about that question. Because I said, Dad, you got to stand before God one day and answer. And your answer is not going to be, well, you don't have a faith. You simply have an association, right? Association by birth. I'm born. So, we can't evaluate Islam by the individual Muslim. The next time somebody says to you, well, I know many Muslims in America or my community, they're all peaceful. So Islam is peaceful. Say to them, can you evaluate the ideology by the practice of an individual? So let me flip it around. I'm a Christian pastor. I talk to Christians all the time, or those who profess to be Christians. And now when someone says I'm a Christian, I got to ask them a few clarifying questions. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, I say, well, do you believe the Bible is the Word of God? Because according to recent polls, 47% of those in America who profess Christianity don't believe the Bible is the inerrant Word of God. Almost half. So that's kind of a fair question, right? Because if you don't believe the Bible is the Word of God, then we don't really have a foundation we can build upon. I got to ask them, do you believe Jesus is the Messiah? Do you believe Jesus is the only way to heaven? Because that's the claim of Christianity. You may or may not agree with it, but that's the claim of Christianity. If Jesus says, I am the Messiah, the way, the truth, and the life, that's the only way. Now, you may not agree with that, but you don't refute what it says in the Bible unless you don't believe the Bible. See how that goes? So the same way, if someone says I'm a Muslim, I have to ask them clarifying questions. Have you read the Quran? You'd be shocked how many Muslims have never read the Quran. Just ask them. Have you read the Quran all the way through? Yourself. Not what somebody taught you, not what your imam taught you at the mosque. Have you read the Quran? You'd be shocked how many of them have never read the Quran. Have you ever read the Sunnah? Well, I'm familiar with it, but which one? Just the major ones. Have you read any of the? Have you read the Sahih Bukhari? Have you read any of the hadith about Muhammad? I would ask my mom today. I asked my mom about the Sharia. She wouldn't know the Sharia if it hit her in the head. She doesn't know the tenets of the Sharia. She's heard of it. She doesn't know the specifics of Sharia. So most Muslims are ignorant of their own beliefs. But we're identifying, if a person comes to me and says, I'm a Christian, and again, I'm saying this with all due respect. Maybe some of you feel this way, some of you don't feel this way. But I got to say it. If a person comes to me today and says, I'm a Christian, and says, but I believe that, for example, let's take a very hot button topic, homosexuality. Homosexuality is okay. God's okay with it. I go, well, I know you're okay with it. You're saying you're okay with it, but how do you know God's okay with it? Show me where in the Bible God says I'm okay with it. Well, you're not going to find that verse. It doesn't exist. Unless you do verbal gymnastics with the Bible, you're not going to find that verse. Because it's both verified in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. Jesus himself verified marriage between one man and one woman. He verified that. Now, here's my question. If that person says, but I'm a Christian, and I love God, but I think it's okay. Do I evaluate Christianity based on that person's testimony? Or do I have to evaluate Christianity based on what the actual text says? So I'm asking people to have the same application for Islam. Yes, your Muslim neighbor may be really nice. Or they may be lying to you. We don't know. You have to ask questions. But you can't evaluate the text of Islam by talking to your nice Muslim neighbor. You have to be able to understand the text of Islam. And that's why it's important to bring those who have come out of Islam so we can learn as the community and as conservatives and as patriots and as Christians. Instead, what do we see in many churches? They don't invite people like me, they're inviting Islamic imams to come in and deceive. So, there is no peace. Now, where do we get the concept of peace? Well, because the early verses of the Quran had non-compulsive verses in it. But they were abrogated. This is a concept in Islam that Muhammad brought forward, abrogation. Surah 2:106, 16:101, and 17:106. Here's Surah 2:106. This is the God of Islam speaking. Now, listen to this. We do not abrogate a verse or cause it to be forgotten, except that we bring forth one better than it or similar to it. You go, what? If God gave revelation to Muhammad of the perfect religion and the final religion, as Islam claims, And then later he comes back and says, you know what, we were thinking about it a little bit more, and then we realized there's something we forgot to tell you, or we changed our mind. You go, what? And believe me, as a Muslim, I struggled with this. I thought, what kind of a God only speaks one language? I'm born in Iran. I was saying this last night. I'm born in Iran. I speak Farsi. I don't speak Arabic. But I can't communicate to this God. Because this God only understands Arabic. If I become a Muslim, I got to go learn Arabic to talk to him during my prayer times. Does that sound weird to you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the God of the Bible, this man.
The only way to know peace is to eliminate conflict, and that's what they're trying to do.
Well, their conflict,
Yeah.
right?
See, that we are conflict.
Absolutely. And that's why, by the way, in the DVD, when I talk about this abrogation, I explain to you a very important concept, very important, and it's the concept of what's called the two houses of Islam. If we don't understand this, we'll never understand Islam. Because what you see is, well, you have Islam in the Middle East, that's radical Islam. And then the Muslims here, that's the true Islam. Wrong. It's the other way around. The Islam of the Middle East is the true Islam. The Muslims here are either don't know, because there are Muslims in America that are agnostic, like my dad. And I never heard my dad once talk about, I want to go kill Jews, I want to go kill Christians. Never. He was a military guy. He didn't grow up with that. He wasn't a religious guy. He was a military guy, right? His whole life was focused on the military. He went to the military academy. He served as a liaison officer from the Shah's army to the U.S. military. And the reason he knew things were turning south is because in 1976, they stopped the liaison visits. He used to come to the U.S. all the time because Carter changed the relationship and started backing Khomeini. And now he's backing, Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro, and now he wants to go visit who's the North Korean guy? Why am I blanking? Thank you. He wants to go visit him. And I don't know. I hope I don't offend anybody here, but my thought is, hey, Jimmy, go visit and stay. Just go stay there. Hang out there for a while. Take a vacation because we could, I think we need a break from Jimmy. But anyway, in here we talk about the two-house concept. So, in that two-house concept, guess what the lower house is called? The house of the infidel. Dar al-Harb, which means house of war. Isn't that nice how they view the house of the non-Muslims? They're at war. And when they go to the upper house, Dar al-Islam, it's the house of peace. But it's not peace, again, it's when all have surrendered kind of peace. Okay? So, there is no peaceful Islam as we would define it. There is none. It doesn't exist. Peace is only when you're surrendered. If you don't plan to surrender, then by definition you and I are at war with Islam. Not because you and I did it, because they have declared it upon us. That's why they call us the house of war. So, let's answer another question then. Okay, Shahram, but aren't there peaceful Muslims? Yes, there are individual Muslims who choose to not follow their religion. They're called non-practicing Muslims. They want to pick and choose. The problem for those Muslims is if they're in a Muslim country, they can't pick and choose. So, here's the claim. Well, ISIS is not Islamic because they've killed Muslims. Muhammad killed Muslims. The caliphs after Muhammad killed Muslims. The reason is because if those Muslims choose not to be observant when the caliph is in charge, then they too can be killed. I saw this firsthand, and my father saw this firsthand in Iran. When Khomeini took over, there were those who wouldn't submit. Some of my father's friends who were in the military wouldn't leave Iran, they wouldn't flee, and they would not, their allegiance was to the Shah, and they would not submit to Islam. So they were jailed, and some of them were executed. They were Muslim, but they wouldn't go along with the Islamic Republic. Does you understand? But here's the thing, though. You can't just evaluate it based on if they're Muslim or not. The issue is Islam today, can it go through a reform? The answer is no. There are individuals who think they can reform Islam, but Islam will never go through a reform, because here's the only way you can reform Islam. Well, short of destroying it, which eventually, as a Christian, of course, I believe that will happen in the last days when Christ returns. But in the meantime, Here's the problem. Remember I said earlier, who is the only eyewitness to Islam? Muhammad. Who's the one who got revelation? Muhammad. Who's the one who's to be emulated? Muhammad. Who's the one who 86% of the text is about? Muhammad. Muhammad said there was abrogation. Muhammad went from the verses of Mecca to the verses of Medina. He abrogated. If there was no verse, I was telling these folks earlier, if there is no verse of the sword, there is no Islam. In 10 years in Mecca, if you're really generous to the guy, he had 150 followers. If you're super generous. When he goes to Medina and he claims the verses change, as he was heading to Medina, the verses change, all of a sudden Islam explodes because of fear and the sword. So the aspect of what we should be asking with this question of Muhammad and reform is, okay, if Muhammad said there was abrogation, and we're saying the abrogation is not right, go back to the peaceful Islam, the early Islam, you have to then say by definition Muhammad was wrong. If you say Muhammad was wrong in what he brought forth, that means the revelation that he brought, that means the Quran should be thrown in the garbage, right? Because all the Maccabean verses and all the abrogated verses were wrong, right? He was wrong. They got to be thrown out. Well, the moment you say he's wrong, you have to discredit him as a prophet. If you discredit him as a prophet and he's the only one who got revelation, that means the entire revelation has to be thrown in the garbage. This entire revelation should be thrown in the garbage. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. Common sense. Well, if that happens, what happens to Islam? There is no Islam. Right? The whole thing falls apart. That's why it will never be reformed. It has to be destroyed. Not by you and I, but by the true God. But it will never be reformed. Now, here's, in the meantime, what we have to do. As a believer, as a Christian, which is what someone did to me. Not did to me. They shared with me the good news. They shared with me the good news. And it was the good news of the gospel that took me out of Islam and brought me into the light. So the only way you're going to change, and here's my kind of line that I say, here's the best reform for a Muslim. Become a Christian. It's the best reform.
Amen.
There's no better reform.
How do you tease it?
Well, you don't tease them. You got to share the truth and pray. Because what happened in my life wasn't anybody cajoling me or convincing me. They just simply shared the gospel message in the Bible, and the Spirit of God worked on my heart. We got to believe in the power of God and the Word of God. Now, let me address ISIS because we're going to be running late. Let's answer this question, because don't you hear it ad nauseum? You heard it again after New York City. ISIS, terrible, horrible, barbaric. The mayor, de Blasio, right? De Blasio, sorry. I have a hard time with listening to them. I'm sorry.
Cameo.
De Blasio, they come out there and it's all about, there are people who are against our values and we have to fight. And no mention of Islam. No mention of even radical Islam, right? And ISIS is not Islamic. Well, in order to answer the question, is ISIS Islamic, you have to ask a couple of questions. Is Muhammad Islamic? Yes. Remember, I just said to you, the answer is 100% yes. No Muhammad, no Islam. Is Muhammad to be imitated? Yes. 86% of all Islamic text is about Muhammad. It's all about Muhammad. He's got to be imitated. So if I could show you, and in the DVD we share more of this, if I can show you that what ISIS is doing is exactly what Muhammad did, and if Muhammad is Islamic, then by definition ISIS is Islamic. Now if I had hours, I could sit here and give you 30, 40, 50 points of intersection. But I want to share just with you a few. Did Muhammad do some of these things? For example, did Muhammad condone his followers to deceive or break treaties? Yes.